Thank you. The recording will be uploaded to the Northamptonshire Council website. Unfortunately, what people will want to see is what the funders have got to say rather than my introduction. So that's all going to be fine. We'd also going to upload a short feedback questionnaire, which we would ask you to complete to help us in planning for future funding fairs. Now, we know that with all the best of intentions, people often don't get round to doing those feedback forms. So we've incentivized it with a prize draw with a John Lewis voucher to encourage you to do that. So we look forward to seeing that from you. So without any more ado, the first session today, as you will realise because you've signed up for it, is to hear from Northamptonshire Acre, who have a programme that has funding attached to it, which is where Jenny is going to be presenting information to you. So there's funding for groups getting involved with that. And also we've got Francis, who coordinates everything to do with village halls, which is slightly off-piste from funding, but often incorporates that in conversation, but is a support to people involved in village halls. And so Francis will also be giving some information. So Jenny and Francis, thank you very much for joining us. And I believe, Jenny, that you're going to kick things off. So over to you for groups getting involved with that. And also we've got Francis, who coordinates everything to do with village halls, which is slightly off-piste from funding, but often incorporates that in conversation, but is a support to people involved in village halls. And so Francis will also be giving some information. So Jenny and Francis, thank you very much for joining us. And I believe, Jenny, that you're going to kick things off. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Oh, how do I? Let me try that again. There we go. Let me try that again. There we go. Okay, lovely. Hopefully you can see my presentation.
It's there, yes.
I always just have this moment of doubt at this point that you're seeing what I'm seeing. So thank you everyone for letting us come and talk to you today. Me and Francis are from an organisation called Northamptonshire Acre. And we are an independent charity which was formed on the 26th of July 1946. So we're coming up to our 75th anniversary this year. We are based at the Hunsby Hill Centre in Northampton. We predominantly work with rural communities across Northamptonshire, and we provide support and advice and resources on a variety of topics, from things like neighbourhood planning, community resilience plans, greening your community, improving biodiversity and natural capital, setting up good neighbour schemes, which is what I've come to talk to you about today, community transport schemes, and we have a toolkit and a directory of transport schemes that we send members, community assets, shops, pubs and libraries, and we have a village halls advisory service, which is where Francis is coming in to talk later. We're a member of the Acre network, so we're part of a bigger organisation that covers the whole of the country, and we also have a trading arm at our centre, which is the barn. So this is our lovely centre, which we love to show off. So Good Neighbour Schemes is where I've come in to talk to you today. Good Neighbour Schemes are local community-led initiatives run by local volunteers who provide day-to-day support for other residents who need help on an occasional or regular basis. And for older people, this support enables them to live in their homes for longer, and it also helps reduce feelings of isolation or loneliness. It's low-level, reliable support. So what we're very keen to stress is that this isn't intending to take on personal care or social care or things that should be done by other organisations or the local authority. It's about neighbourly tasks. So examples of that could include things like changing light bulbs, checking smoke alarms, giving a lift to the doctor's surgery or to the hospital, helping with filling in forms, reading, writing letters, dog walking, shopping, befriending, and providing things like community food swaps or food boxes. So a lot of these things have been happening during the pandemic naturally. Lots of these groups have sprung up. And each of our Good Neighbours schemes are different. We've got around 30 Good Neighbours schemes across Northamptonshire now, and each scheme is different. Some of them tailor their support more towards older people. Some people work more with younger families. Some schemes help everybody in their local community. It really does depend on what the scheme wants to offer and what their skills are within the scheme as well. So the steering group is usually made up of a few people, and they define what assistance they're going to offer, and also within how large an area. So some Good Neighbour schemes cover whole market towns, some of them cover little villages of only a few hundred people. It really does depend on the scheme itself as to how big an area they want to cover and what they want to do. And the levels of activity generally vary. So a few schemes which perhaps help a couple of people a week, and other schemes which are supporting up to 40 people a week. It again depends on the size of the scheme and what they're prepared to offer the people in the local community. So how it works, well, usually there's a coordinator or a couple of coordinators who have a mobile phone and details of the volunteers and what those volunteers are prepared to offer and when they're available. Anyone in genuine need of help can ring the number, and the coordinator will identify an available volunteer who will provide help and then contact them. The volunteer will then contact the resident to arrange a suitable time for visiting, and we also provide signposting help as well. So if someone comes along and they perhaps need some help with debt advice, or they have bigger needs that we are unable to manage as a Good Neighbours scheme, we will then signpost them to other voluntary or charity organisations or statutory organisations as needed. So our Good Neighbours schemes are really well versed in the local offer of what is available to support people, and well used to referring people to that support. So help is always given free of charge, although sometimes a reasonable charge is made for mileage. For example, if someone's getting a lift to the local doctor's surgery. The scheme is organised by a small steering group. So usually we'd like to say 2 or 3 people to spread that workload. You don't want all of this onus falling onto one person and suffering with burnout. But that steering group determines the need and the capacity. They recruit the volunteers. They decide on the scope of the scheme, so what will be offered. And as I said, that's very different. Some schemes only offer food support, whereas others will offer a full package of options. They get funding and insurance, arrange training and DBS checks if needed. They purchase mobile phones and laptops if required, and then they help with setting up activities and events. So some of the Good Neighbour schemes have regular coffee mornings or meets up in the pub to reduce social isolation. And that's sort of their main aim for some of those schemes. So our project was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund for 3 years. We're coming into our 2nd year now, and it was to set up and support 30 Good Neighbour schemes across Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough and East Northampton, although we can also fund schemes in Northampton in the rural areas. It covers 2 full-time workers who are in place now, and we have one on the call as well, which is excellent. And each new Good Neighbours project can get up to £700 to help with setup costs. And we also hold an annual event, hopefully, each year to celebrate all of the Good Neighbours, bring them all together and introduce them. But we do have regular meetups via Zoom at the moment. We are very much looking forward to the day we can all meet face to face again, which hopefully won't be too far into the future. So for the other areas in Northamptonshire, with Daventry, we were working with Daventry District. We're now working with West Northampton Council, and we will support new groups to apply for funding in that area, as we will in South Northampton as well. So any groups in South Northampton, Daventry, we can still help you. The funding would just come from a different place, and you'd need to apply for it yourself, but we would support you to do that. So set up a scheme. First thing you need to do is identify need and volunteers. So that usually involves sending out a survey to ask if anyone would like some help, if anyone would like to give help. Now, what we tend to find is that hardly anyone says they want help, and we get lots of people offering help. But that's generally because people are quite shy and basically untrusting of anything that pops up in their community, unsurprisingly. And as the Good Neighbours scheme grows and builds trust in the local community, more and more people come forward and say, actually, I could do with a little bit of extra support and help. It can be sort of a case of pride or just confidence in coming forward. So to establish a Good Neighbour scheme, as a minimum, you need a steering group of between 2 and 4 volunteers, a constitution, which we can help you. We have a template of Good Neighbours, a Good Neighbours constitution template, which has worked for other similar groups, and a bank account, which we recommend is separate from the parish council. The scheme will also need insurance, which is around £150 a year, a mobile phone, and then you might want a laptop, although a lot of our Good Neighbours do go old-fashioned with a good old pen, paper and a folder. The cost of setting up a scheme is between £700 and £1,000, and the ongoing costs are very low. So once you have that initial setup cost, it generally, the cost will be your insurance each year, any extra DBS checks you might need, and publicity material. And as we said, funding can be identified to help cover the costs above. So how we can help. So as part of our project, we can offer £700 for help with startup costs if you're in the north or rural Northampton. If you're not, as I said, we can help you find funding. We have a free toolkit and step-by-step guides which cover all aspects from setting up a scheme right from the very beginning to the end. And these were developed with existing Good Neighbour schemes, and they all had an input into that. So they're full of valuable information from people which have been there and done it before. We have lots of free templates, things like constitutions, volunteer forms, policies and procedures, so that you're not bogged down with the admin when you first start. You can get on with helping people. We provide evaluation forms for monitoring your scheme, which is really useful for applying for funding and also evidencing once you've received funding. Our other schemes offer support with experience, policies, ideas and mentoring. We have roughly every sort of 6 weeks a little get together on Zoom where schemes can say how they're getting on, new ones can introduce themselves, and we all offer each other help and support and advice. We also send out an e-bulletin every couple of weeks with information about funding and other local organisations to help keep you in the loop. And we also offer free training for you and your volunteers as well. And so we are there to help you as much as we can in that first stage. So one of the questions we get a lot is that we already run a community group, and this is quite common after the pandemic. Lots of informal community groups have sprung up helping people, and including these kind organisations. So can those types of organisations become a Good Neighbour scheme? Yes. It doesn't matter if you're building completely from scratch and there's nothing at all in your local community, or if you're already helping and supporting people, you can still become a Good Neighbour scheme. It's a bit like joining a network. So you don't need to change the name of your group or your community offer. All that we ask is that you have a constitution and a bank account, and that you have safeguarding and equal opportunities policies. We don't interfere or take over running of the group. It's still managed by you and your local community. We're just here to offer help and support if needed. So one of the questions we often get is, why is this needed? Why are these jobs not being done by the local authority? As I said at the start, it's not intended to take over the jobs of social workers. This is general neighbourly activity, intended to help people stay at home for longer, to provide a better sort of community spirit and to reduce feelings of isolation in our rural communities. But one of the things we did last year was we carried out a survey into rural food poverty and rural food insecurity in Northamptonshire. And one of the scary statistics to come out of that was that up to 60% of people didn't know where to go for help if they found themselves in a situation where they didn't have any food. And we were very aware of the fact that if it is with just food support, then it could be with any other form of service that they might need help with. So it could be things like debt advice or help with a relative which has extra needs. Any sort of support needs that would be easily accessible in a town situation, perhaps more difficult to access in a rural community. And there is a general lack of awareness of the support that's available. So we really want these groups to spring up and help support their local community. One of the good things to come out of the survey was when we asked them who supported them if they needed help in the last year. Overwhelmingly, lots of people either went to an informal group in their local community or a Good Neighbours scheme. As I said, we only have around 30 at the moment Good Neighbour schemes in Northamptonshire, so we were really pleased that so many people had access to Good Neighbour scheme during the pandemic. It was really reassuring that these are the sorts of support that people go to. So if you have any questions or information, I think we're having a little Q&A towards the end, aren't we, Sean? But I have my contact details are here, and the new field workers' contact details are also just here as well. I'll pop them into the chat to make it easy. And Emma, who is also on this Zoom call at the moment, works with us at Daventry, and her Western Pants Council email is here as well. So I'll pop that in the chat as well. I think at this point I am handing over to Francis. Francis, you're on.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. And yeah, we'll have a conversation after Francis has made her presentation. So, Francis, are you ready to share your screen?
I'll go ahead. Thank you very much, Sean and Jenny.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. And yeah, we'll have a conversation after Francis has made her presentation. So, Francis, are you ready to share your screen?
I'll go ahead. Thank you very much, Sean and Jenny. Can you see my screen?
Yes, fantastic. We can.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so hello everyone, I'm Frances Harris, Northamptonshire Acres Community Facilities Advisor, and my role is to provide help and support to a whole range of community facilities, mainly community buildings, so that's things like village and church halls, WI halls and community centres, but also recreation grounds, playing fields and parks. The advice covers a whole range of issues. I've just set out here some of the main areas that it covers. A big chunk is to do with governance, so looking at governing documents, helping committees understand and interpret them, review them, and where necessary, amend them. I can also provide help with trustee roles, so understanding the roles and responsibilities of a charity trustee, looking at personal liability. This is increasingly, I think, of concern to charity trustees, and also help with incorporation. So those committees that are thinking about becoming charitable companies. We also provide help with applicable law. That will largely be charity law, but things like health and safety and licensing are also relevant. And because most of the organisations that manage these facilities are charities, they also have to act within or operate within the Charity Commission's regulatory framework, and we can help with that. We also have a range of sample policies that we can provide to committees, and we can also help with making funding suggestions and provide help with actually making grant applications. We provide a range of training for people who manage community facilities. So just to give an example of some of the training that we provided over the last 12 months or so, this has included trustee roles and responsibilities, incorporation, data protection, social media, PAT testing, safeguarding, which is, I think, of increasing importance for small organisations, and we're trying to increase awareness of the need for safeguarding policies and procedures to be in place amongst community organisations. And we've also provided training for committees to help them manage community buildings during the pandemic. The advice that we provide, the Village Halls Advisory Service, can either be provided on an ad hoc basis, so as and when we receive inquiries, but mainly it's given through our Community Facilities Membership Scheme. This is run on an annual basis from April until March. The membership fee is £40. And one of the main benefits is 5 hours free phone, email, and where necessary, Zoom support. There's also, Jenny mentioned that we are a member of the ACRE network, and our umbrella organisation manages the network. It's called National ACRE, and it's published, I think it's around 40 information sheets of village halls on a whole range of topics. They really are invaluable, and copies of those are free for ACRE members. And there's also a free bi-monthly newsletter which contains up-to-date news on issues affecting community facilities. And there's a discount on National ACRE's model legal documents. I'm going to just take you through a few sort of case studies of where can show the sort of practical help that we give to community buildings. But I just want to mention very briefly COVID-19. We can't really get away from it, can we? Following yesterday's announcement, we know that we're going to be, essentially speaking, still in step 3 until I think the 19th of July. So that does mean for community buildings, I'm afraid, that they will have to continue in accordance with those restrictions. The good news is that there is financial help out there, government grant funding available via North Hants Council and West North Hants Council. The main grant funding of relevance now, with effect from the 1st of April, is the Restart Grant Scheme. The amount payable depends on the organisation's rateable value. For most village halls, that will mean £8,000. That's for businesses with a rateable value of £15,000 or below. It doesn't matter if, as a village hall or community building charity, you don't pay business rates. It's the fact that you have a rateable value which makes you eligible. And just be sure to apply for a grant in the leisure strand. There are 2 strands to the Restart grants, the leisure strand and the non-essential retail strand. And it's the leisure strand that's relevant. And then there's also the additional restrictions support grant, which has been in place since November of last year. This is a discretionary fund, and so could be of help to those buildings which don't have a rateable value. So, for example, church halls, because they're managed by an ecclesiastical charity, don't have a rateable value. And I know of 2 so far that have managed to get a discretionary additional restriction support grant. Again, apply to North Hants Council. I should have put West North Hants Council as well, depending on where you are in the county. And finally, something that really is of invaluable help to community facilities is National ACRE's information sheet about reopening after lockdown. Many community buildings actually have remained shut over the past 12 months, and so are just beginning to open up again. And so this sheet is very, very helpful. It provides lots of resources, including a COVID-19 risk assessment for committees, management committees, and also for hirers, and will be very helpful for halls, either those that haven't opened at all and are just starting to reopen, but also for those that have been doing a phased reopening through the roadmap out of lockdown. And that's available for free. You can find it and download it from our website or from the National ACRE website. So I'm just going to look at some case studies. These aren't specific to particular organisations that I've helped. I pulled these together from a range of inquiries I've had over the years. And the first one is I'm quite often contacted by management committees in a quandary about, they have an ageing building, and the discussion what they're having to deal with is, do they build a new hall, or should they just embark upon a major refurbishment project? And quite often the consideration will be also, do you build a new building on the existing site, or perhaps it would be better to look for a new site on which to build a new building? And lots of issues tend to swirl around this. So, It could be that the existing site lacks parking. So if you found a new site and built a new building, you could provide parking, but then it could be that you have a building which is less easy for people to walk to. And of course, at the moment, we're trying to think about ways of decreasing dependence on cars. So if you have a building that people can walk to, that actually has benefits. Quite often people are thinking about things like hosting other community facilities, so a community shop or a community cafe. So thinking about building a new building that will accommodate those other village organisations. And sometimes the driver can be the availability of grant funding. And all I would say about that is that, perhaps if you are in the HS2 area where that there is an amount of grant funding available that wasn't previously there, don't allow that in and of itself to be the driver behind this. What you really need to do is establish the needs of your village hall charity and the needs of your community. So what is key to all of this in reaching a view about what the best option is community consultation. So conduct surveys, hold public meetings. It could be that something like community-led planning would be of use, where actually it's not just about this particular community building, but it's about assessing other community facilities within the village as well and seeing how to make the best use of them. So opening up the consultation and involving other groups. For the community building management committee itself, though, I think something that can help is to establish a subcommittee or indeed a working group. If you establish a working group, you can invite people from outside the village hall community committee to join, and that can help to open up the discussion. Just make sure you have terms of reference for the group. And one thing I would say is that it is worthwhile thinking about becoming a charitable incorporated organisation. This is a relatively new structure for charities, which means that they benefit from a corporate structure without actually becoming charitable companies. And by doing this, it can help reduce the risk in terms of personal liability for charity trustees whilst the project is being managed, particularly a major building project. So the second case study is from time to time, I have to say not very often, I'm pleased to say, but I am contacted by committees where they feel that they have an issue with perhaps a particular trustee or maybe one or two trustees that they see to be a problem. And I'm asked, can a problem trustee be removed? Well, the simple answer is no, no, you can't do that unless there's a specific power to do so under your governing document, and that is highly unusual. But what I would say is before you even get to that point, I think it's worth looking at, well, what is the problem? Is it simply a question of someone who's possibly just putting their point of view a little bit too robustly? Could it be a question perhaps of the chair managing meetings a little bit more effectively? So I think the thing is to approach this from a perspective of this isn't a problem, but something that can be managed. But the best advice I can give is to avoid the situation arising in the first place. So in advance of someone becoming a trustee, make sure that they understand what the roles and responsibilities of being a charity trustee are. So for example, if you're holding your AGM, when the chair is about to hold the elections for elected trustees, explain what the roles and responsibilities of a charity trustee are. When the secretary writes to appointing organisations, inviting organisations to appoint representative trustees, enclose something that explains what the role and responsibilities of a charity trustee are. Another thing you can do is make sure that you have an effective induction procedure in place. I've put here for new trustees, but I think it's worth doing for your existing trustees as well. So at the first committee meeting after the AGM, have a little induction process in place. Make sure that every trustee has a copy of your governing document has read it and understands it, has an opportunity to ask questions if they don't understand any aspects of it. Make sure everybody has a copy and has read the Charity Commission's publication called The Essential Trustee, and that sets out the 6 key duties of a charity trustee. It is important, I think, that everyone reads that. And another good thing to do is to have a trustee code of conduct in place. And what this does is, so the Essential Trustee that I mentioned, the Charity Commission publication, that sets out the legal responsibilities of charity trustees. The Trustee Code of Conduct is more practical. What that does is it confirms things like, the way that trustees are expected to behave, that you're expected to attend meetings, you're expected to have read your papers beforehand, i.e. to be prepared. If you can't attend, to send your apologies, that discussion will be held in a respectful and polite manner, and that trustees understand that the committee works on the basis of joint and several responsibility. So accepting a majority vote, for example, it's a very useful document to have. And if you do encounter a problem with an individual, it's good to be able to produce the Trustee Code of Conduct and remind people of it at the start of the meeting. So case study 3, very simple and straightforward one here. Energy costs, quite often a problem for village halls, particularly in older buildings. And I'm often asked, how can we reduce energy costs? I do have resources I can provide. A useful thing for people to do is to carry out an energy audit, and quite often this provides quick, easy things that you can do to help reduce your energy costs. It might actually identify a bigger thing you need to do, but it's better to know about it. But one of the obvious things is, well, think about changing your energy supplier, shop around, or you can use an energy broker. There are specialist energy brokers who work with the charity sector. Last year, a hall changed its energy supplier and ended up saving £400 a year, so really quite a significant saving. It's also worth remembering that there's a reduced level of VAT on energy costs associated with non-business use of the hall. It's a little bit complicated, but it's set out in an information sheet, one of those information sheets I mentioned earlier, on VAT on fuel and power supplies. So the next one, as I mentioned earlier, I do provide quite often help with governing documents. And actually during the pandemic, a lot of halls have decided to take the time when they've been closed to do a review of their governing document. In the past, I have been contacted by both the parish council and a village hall jointly about a lease from the parish council to the village hall. And they asked me if I could recommend solicitors they could go to draw up an extension to the lease, which was due to expire. They provided me with a copy of their trust deed. I did a quick check on the Charity Commission registered and found that in fact what they thought was their trust deed wasn't the governing document that was listed on the Charity Commission register. And in fact, the document that was on the register was an earlier trust deed and conveyance, not a lease. And the Village Hall Management Committee managed to track down a copy of this. And from this, it was clear that actually the Village Hall charity owned the land. It didn't lease it. Therefore, there was no need for a lease in the first place. So at some point, there was a misunderstanding to do with the basis upon which the charity occupied the land. So both parties now, and by that I mean the parish council and the village hall, now understand their roles. They're working in accordance with the correct governing document, and thankfully they avoided having to incur unnecessary legal costs by seeking the advice of a solicitor. And the final case study, I've mentioned trustee roles a lot, and this is an example really of a case where I've helped. A village hall management committee came to me actually asking if I could provide funding advice in relation to a major refurbishment project. In the course of meeting them, they asked the question whether their parish council should be applying for grants. Their parish council is the custodian trustee of their charity. Just a quick word about what custodian trustee means. It can also be referred to as a holding trustee. This is the person or organisation which holds legal title on behalf of a charity. It holds legal title in its land, its property. It's a purely residual role. The charity trust, the custodian trustee and holding trustee has no role to play in the day-to-day management of the charity. That is the responsibility of the management committee, and the members of the management committee are the charity trustees. So the simple answer to that question is that grant applications should be made by the management committee, and it's the management committee who will be responsible for overseeing the refurbishment project, and it's the management committee who will enter into contracts with building contractors. So that's it from me. Some contact details for me if you need to contact me at all. You can also find those on the Northamptonshire ACO website. So Sean, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
And back
Thank
to
you very much. Right. Okay, so thanks for those presentations, Jenny and Francis. So do we have any questions? Now I see in the chat, and it was actually on a private message to me, I had a message from Stan at Outdoor Tribe saying, can a community interest company approach Northants Acre for training support? I don't know which of you would like to pick up on that.
I absolutely, yes, that wouldn't be a problem, but slightly different from the examples that I was giving, because the big advantage with being a community interest company is you're not hemmed in by charity law and charity regulations, so you're much freer in terms of the way that you can operate. But Jenny, I don't know about you, but I'm certain that that's something that we could help with.
Okay. Right, is there anything for, I mean, those presentations were very full and complete, so you may not have questions, which is, do you know, it's just fine. Going once, going twice, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and speak up or use the facility and wave a hand, that's also good. But otherwise, I'm going to draw this first session to a close and thank Jenny and Francis for your presentation. Just to remind you that the session will be uploaded to the website for you to hear again, and of course for those folks that couldn't get along, they'll also be able to watch and pick up the salient points. Please remember to complete the online questionnaire and include your email address if you'd like to be entered into that mystery prize draw. So thank you everybody for joining. I hope that delivered what you were anticipating, and I hope that you're also booked in for other sessions across these 3 days. So without any more ado, goodbye everybody, and thank you. Maybe I'll see you again.